Hello, everybody, and welcome to Design System London number 14. Very excited to be here in this rather spectacular place. I always say that for every host because everyone has such an amazing space, and then we get to the next one and it's like, wow, even more amazing. So whoever's next, you know, was waiting for you. So who am I for those of, actually, before I even get started, who has been to DSL before? Get some hands up. Yes, excellent. Quite a lot. I like that. Who went to the last one? This is the trick one. Last one. Okay, that's the last one in London. I'm just saying this because I want to brag, because the last one was actually in Paris. So this is just me bragging. So yeah, normally they obviously happen in London. The last one we had was in Paris. We were very fortunate to do that, so that was exciting. So if any of you feel like, oh, I've got connected in a European city and I would like to host this event, come and see me later. Okay. So who am I? My name is Louise, and I am head of product design at YLD, who is the sponsor and organizer. Design System London, someone was asking me earlier, how long has it been going on? And we actually started back in 2018, 2017, 2018. And it was born out of another community conference we were running about React. And someone there was talking on stage about design systems. And we were like, oh, this is a really interesting topic. We think this is going to take off. So we decided to jump on this. We had 2 conferences, and then the pandemic happened. So we went then online, and then we came out of the pandemic, and we went back into person. And yeah, so this is our 14th event in total. So our goal with Design System London is ultimately to create a space for people to talk about design systems, but they don't need to be experts. We are open to all levels. So we have people who have been speakers on huge conferences around the world, and we have people who are first-time speakers. We like to keep the topics quite varied, so if this is your first time and you don't know much about design system, hopefully there will be some nuggets for you to take away. And if you're an experienced, seasoned design system person who thinks like, I don't think there's anything else I could possibly learn about design system, I would like to prove you wrong, and hopefully by the end of it, you would have picked up something else. So yeah, that's kind of just like a little bit about who we are. This evening's agenda, we have already come to the welcome and some introductions. We are going to hear a word from our sponsors in a minute. And then we have 3 fantastic speakers and talks today. This is actually the first one we're going to have someone mentioning AI as part of their talk. And I was wondering how long that would take. But I'm glad that we finally caught up with the rest of the world. So we're looking forward to that. We also have another first for this one. So the first talk is a little bit more general and not so purely around design system. So that's quite exciting as well, because obviously there is a world outside design system when it comes to product design. I know some of you might not believe that, but that is the case. So looking forward to that as well. We are going to have a break after the first 2 speakers, and in that break, there should be more of this fantastic food and drinks. So if you saw that and was like, wow, there will be more opportunities. If you were a late arrival, I will encourage you to try out the food during the break, because it's magnificent. Then we'll have another talk about design tokens, and then we're going to finish off with a Q&A session. For that, there are some, just a recap of the topics. As you can see, I'm well prepared on the slide flow. This one is where I want to draw your attention to, which is the QR code that will beat any QR code you have ever met in your entire life. It has everything. So for each speaker, if you have any questions for them, this is the place to put those questions. And when you do in that Slido, please mention as well who it's for, so we can direct the questions correctly. Obviously, you need to follow us, because otherwise, how do you know when our next event is? Join us if you are looking for a work at the moment. YLD has openings. See all of the recordings, because you come to this for the first time and you go, how have I not seen this before? There is so much good content. Luckily for you, there's a whole YouTube channel where you can catch up on everything you missed. And then, yeah, just like generally, this is a good one. We also included feedback form because we love feedback. So after the event, if you think that it was fantastic, please let us know. If you didn't think it was fantastic, don't let us know. Well, I'm confident that you may not think that. Oh, things are rolling very quickly. So a word from our amazing sponsors, and we're going to start with the organizer, with this YLD. And for this one, I would love to welcome onto the stage Jessica. Here we go. Do come up.
Hello. Ooh, that's loud. So hello, evening everyone. My name is Jessica and I am the Head of Client Services at YLD. And I'm here to give you a very quick overview of YLD, who we are, what we do and why we do it. So we are a product design and software engineering consultancy that's been around for over a decade. We actually celebrated our 12th birthday this month. And community has always been central to how we grow and how we help our clients to succeed. We turn digital investments into results. We build what matters, we deliver it with impact, and we make sure it lasts beyond our support. Our design, tech, and change teams work as one, using AI where it actually makes a difference. And we partner with tech, design, and product leaders to create and refine design systems that solve real challenges and align with business goals. We work with companies across publishing, healthcare, fintech, renewable energy, you name it, the list just keeps on growing. And as I mentioned, community and providing clarity to our clients really matter to us, and design plays a huge part of the work that we do. We put users first and we shape solutions that succeed from day one and leave our clients in a better place than we find them. That means sharing our knowledge and equipping teams with the skills that really stick. YLD has been leading in design systems since the DSL launch nearly a decade ago, as Louise mentioned. And I think we've already done a little hands up to who was there, but who was there for the OG? Anybody? I know somebody was, yes. I was like, I know I'll have at least one hand. And another cheesy hands up if you worked with a consultancy before. And keep your hand up if you loved that experience. Well, that's the standard that we aim for at YLD. Most of our clients stay in our network and communities long after we finish working with them. Loads of them are probably here tonight. Lovely to see you. And that's the kind of partnership that I'm really proud of. So if you do want to know anything more about our projects, starting a project with us, our open roles, or more about other community events that we do, then please do chat with me, with Louise, or anybody else wearing a YLD t-shirt. I chose not to wear one tonight, and we shall not talk about that. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this part's going to be the difficult one because now I've got technical things going on. So we are going to hear a word as well for our other sponsor, which is JSK.
Welcome, everybody. So I'm John Warden. I'm Head of UX and Design for our commercial and medical divisions at GSK. And as you just saw, that's what we do at GSK. We unite science, talent, and technology to try and empower people and hopefully help people with like 2.5 billion people with their healthcare processes. So Yeah, I just wanted to say, this is the very first, by the way, talking about events, this is the very first design system or design event within GSK. So we used to work in Brentford, down by the A4, and we moved last year in August. And Matt, special call out, who's going to speak to us later on, has spent a lot of time and effort along with Louis and the YLD team to help support, get this going, and spent a lot of time making it actually happen. So for me personally, and what we're trying to do in GSK, is empower design generally across the board. We spent a lot of time over the last 4 or 5 years, and there's people in the audience here who know they are, who have tried to bring UX principles together, design system management together, organising design within the organisation, because there are many, many people who work at GSK where design isn't as relevant as it is for some of the people who work in marketing or in some of our process orientation places. So I think we are empowering design, making it move it go forwards. And so for us, we're very proud to be able to have this event here and to welcome you guys along. And I'm really looking forward to having the speakers turn up, talk about what they're doing. And hopefully this will be the first of many events for us at GSK. So look, without further ado, I want to get to the meat of the content today. So I'm going to welcome Matt to the stage because he's the first one who's going to speak. And I hope you really enjoy the rest of the day. And as Louis said, at the break, please do eat the food because we've got lots and lots of food and we've got lots and lots of alcohol. So please do drink it, do eat it, and have a great time, okay? And enjoy the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so indeed, we are going to move on to the first speaker. And as John said, more music. It was great, but I think it's time to move on. So I want to welcome our first speaker. Yeah, he's not coming on stage. Matt, sorry, come and join me. Here you go. Stage is yours.
Thank
you.
If you
have any questions for Matt, use that fantastic QR code.
Thank you. I am just going to double check that we are recording. Yes, we are recording. Good. Okay. Yeah. We've had a few technical issues. So yes, we are recording. We are recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let me just get onto my first slide. Okay. So, you're ready? Yeah? Okay, I'm ready. Let's go. So, design keeps evolving. New tools, new systems, and new intelligence. It can feel overwhelming at times, but it's also what keeps our craft alive. And this talk is about finding calm in the chaos. It's about embracing imperfection and remembering that the most human thing we can do is to keep learning. So, hello everyone. So my name is Matt. So a little bit about me. I've worked in the design industry now for over 2 decades, and I've seen a lot of change over that time. And we'll get onto some of that lately, shortly after this. So I'm currently a design lead at GSK in the commercial and medical customer experience team, where among other things, I help manage the design systems that underpin our digital marketing platforms. And what else about me? I'm a bit of a francophone. I have an amazing French partner who incidentally also works for GSK. She's not a designer, she's a scientist. So on another site entirely. We also have 2 wonderful kids who are both far too clever for their own good and naughty. And also a very handsome but very dumb cat called Marcel. Nice French name there. So. I'm also a bit of a nerd, and I love things like, and some of the GSK people here, they won't know about this about me, so you're going to learn some stuff tonight. I love things like painting Warhammer miniatures, yes, and astronomy, although I'm not very good at either of them. As you can see, I'm particularly proud of this blob on the bottom left. That's actually Jupiter with some of its moons. And also, just above it here, this one, that's Saturn. But you'll have to take my word for it. You try taking a picture with a mobile phone through a telescope, you'll see how hard it is. But yeah, that is Saturn, believe it or not. This is also probably the first time a Space Marine has been in a GSK PowerPoint presentation, so I can see the GSK team sweating a little bit at the back there. But, I also love watching movies, TV, reading books, all the usual stuff, playing video games and so on. I especially like horror and sci-fi genre, so you're going to see some references along the way. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's start by talking about a man who lived 2,500 years ago, and his name was Heraclitus. He's a famously miserable Greek philosopher. He was also known as the weeping philosopher because apparently he was so overwhelmed by how awful people were that he cried all the time. And that's why when you find pictures of him, you can see he's actually, weeping there. It's a little dramatic, but each to his own. However, he did say something that I think is still very relevant today, especially to us as designers or design curious. The only constant in life is change. And I like that line, but I don't think Heraclitus was saying that change is necessarily bad. He was saying it's inevitable. And that's a relief, really, because if you're a designer, change is your job description. We design things, we test, we iterate, and we release stuff. Then someone says, I want you to make it pop, and then you have to start all over again. It's change. Heraclitus is also famous for saying you never step into the same river twice, which in modern terms is like saying you never step into the same Figma file twice. I think this is an image from Zero Height. Credits to Zero Height there, but I thought it summed it up completely. Each time you step into a new Figma file or a Figma file, someone's moved a frame, they've renamed a bunch of layers, they've hidden a design iteration on a branch called Final Draft Final version 3B. You can relate, yes, I'm laughing, you can relate to that. So change isn't new. But how we handle it, that's what defines us. And that's what I want to talk about today. So when we talk about change, what are we really talking about? Because it's not just new hardware or software updates. It's usually one of three things: tools, teams, or trends. Tools change constantly, as we know. Our favorite apps push updates and new features frequently. AI designs your components before you've even finished thinking of them. A tool you relied on yesterday is suddenly out of fashion. Sorry, Sketch and XD. And teams change, people move on, budgets shift, priorities flip. I'm sure you can relate to all of this. One reorg later in your design team. Design system now lives in a completely different business unit with a completely different team. And trends, that's a tricky one. What looked modern and elegant last year suddenly starts to feel dated. Anyone remember flat design? Yeah, skeuomorphism, grunge, deconstructivism, showing my age here. Each one in its time felt new, fresh, and superior until the next trend comes along. So we can't control that pace of change, but we can control our mindset. The mindset to pause and ask which changes actually matter. For me, I think that our principles survive our tool changes. Our collaboration habits survive our team changes. And a clear definition of success survives taste changes. If you base everything on the right principles, healthy collaboration, and the knowledge of what success looks like, and the tools, team, and trends don't matter in the end. So change itself isn't the problem, but thinking we can stop it is. Our job is to stay flexible enough to keep our principles upright, even when everything shifts around us like it is now. That's how we design, not against change, but with it. So, again, showing my age a bit here, but I started out as a graphic designer in the late 90s, the very late 90s, back when layouts were still often done on drawing boards. When I studied at college, at university, we did designs on drawing boards with pens and paper. Photoshop, when I first used Photoshop, only had one layer and one undo. Imagine that. So if you did something wrong, you could go back once, and that was it. And then you had to start again. But then came the web. I remember building sites entirely out of tables and sliced up images. Then Flash arrived and everyone lost their minds. Dancing logos, 3D buttons, sound effects, I've done it all. To hell with accessibility. I'm not even sure we knew what accessibility was back then. We were all animators for about 5 minutes. Any Flash apologists in the room? I loved Flash. It was great, yeah. Oh, I want it back. But then mobile came along and suddenly everything looked ridiculous on a 3-inch screen. Plus Apple killed off Flash, which in hindsight wasn't such a bad thing. So we learned again, jQuery, React, Sketch, Figma, from style guides to design systems. Every wave of change has forced us as designers to grow. And the successful designers, I think, are the ones who've been able to adapt, because we're still here. So I suppose now you'd call me a product designer or a UXer or a design lead, depending on who I'm talking to or what the particular flavor of the month is. I think Shopify recently have gone back to simply saying designer. It's like we've gone full circle. But really, like all designers, I'm just a problem solver with a particular set of skills. And that is a reference from Taken, obviously. Now, Liam Neeson might have used his skills for hunting down kidnappers, but I use mine for design, which admittedly is slightly less cinematic, but it's still about saving people from bad situations, right? So today, as we look at change, consider it as something not to fear, but something that defines us and shapes us and keeps our work alive. Because the truth is, design is never done. Every project, every pattern, every Figma component is just a snapshot, a frozen moment in time. And that's a good thing, because if it was done, then there would be nowhere else to go. Our jobs as designers isn't to make perfect systems. It's to make systems that can grow. We talk a lot about craft, but what we're really doing is managing evolution, giving teams a shared language for change. And sometimes that language can get a bit complicated. Nowhere do we wrestle with perfection more than in design systems. I was reading an article recently about design system trends, and one example made me laugh and want to cry at the same time. It talked about how some teams, in the pursuit of perfection, create tokens for everything, literally hundreds of them. And so you end up with things like component, marquee, space, inset, 2x, media, query S. And then they wonder why it takes 6 months to ship anything. Sometimes we get so obsessed with perfection that we forget who we're building for. Systems start serving themselves instead of serving the people who use them. So I want to talk a little bit about Omni. So this is our design system at GSK in our particular department. We have a number of design systems, but our one in commercial medical is called Omni. And we kind of fell into that trap initially. We started to tokenize everything. It looked great. It ticks all the design system boxes until our actual users, the agencies, the designers, the marketers, started to try to use our design system. And they found it confusing. So we took a step back and asked, why are we doing this? Who are we doing it for? So for version 2, we stripped it down. We only tokenized the things that the users shouldn't touch. And then everything else we kept as normal Figma styles that those end users could actually edit easily. And the end result was that we have happier end users, faster adoption, fewer messages asking, how do I change the color of that button again? The lesson was simple. Sometimes making progress actually means doing less. And that experience leads us to a principle I'd like to share with you now. I believe that a good design system should make the common 80% of work effortless, consistent, accessible, and on brand, so that teams can get on with their day-to-day tasks. But those who need a little extra flex can spend their energy on the remaining 20%. And that 20%, I believe, is where the creativity lives. It's where differentiation happens, and it's where humans matter most in that process. If you lock everything down, you don't get consistency, you get conformity, and conformity doesn't inspire anyone. You need that 80% structure, agreed, but you need that 20% creativity as well, which is a healthy ratio for design and, I believe, for life in general, actually. And when we talk about creativity, that 20%, it's worth remembering that most of what we call new isn't actually new at all. That 20% of creativity is where we find our version of originality. This guy here, that's Mark Twain. So he once wrote, there's no such thing as a new idea. It's impossible. We simply take a lot of old ideas and put them into a sort of mental kaleidoscope. We give them a turn and make them new, and we make new and curious combinations. I think he was right. We spend so much time chasing originality, trying to be the first to do something new. But the truth is, there are no new things, not really. Every idea, every interface pattern, Every trend is built on what came before. We remix things, we interpret them, reinterpret them, and then we refine them. And that's not a bad thing. That's what creativity is. It's connecting familiar dots in unfamiliar ways. And that same idea, remixing, is exactly what's happening with AI. AI doesn't invent, it resynthesizes. The difference is we bring meaning to those combinations. We decide why they matter. So maybe it's freeing to actually realize we don't have to be original. We just have to care about why it matters. Because change doesn't always mean creating something new. Sometimes it means seeing the old with fresh eyes. So I want to tell you about a simple pattern that I've noticed myself, and probably a lot of you as well are doing the same. A pattern that I've noticed myself following whenever I work with AI-powered tools. I'm going to call it the 3 A's, augment, audit, and align. And it's not by chance that I borrowed the squiggle. Some of you might be familiar with the squiggle here by Damien Newman, because I think it shows perfectly how ideas evolve from ambiguity to clarity. With augment, I let the AI do what it's good at: speed, structure, boilerplating. I give it a bunch of jumbled notes, bunch of voice recordings, and then ask it to do its thing. Generate the skeleton of a component, draft a user interview, summarize feedback, create a design checklist. It's not cheating, it's a head start. Then we have audit. This is where I slow down and review what the AI has generated. I check the ethics, I check the language, the brand alignment, and so on. This is where my craft and experience and your craft and experience really matter in this process. And then align. You need to bring it back to humans. I share, validate, and connect it to actual goals, because AI doesn't care if it fits your design standards or your design system. You care. Because the important thing to grasp is it's not man versus machine, it's man with machine, and that pattern helps keep me grounded. I augment the start, I audit the middle, and I align the end. And that's also the 80-20 principle in action as well. You automate the easy bits and focus on our human time on where it actually counts. So thinking back to our friend Heraclitus, AI is the next big current in our river, and it's moving fast. With tools like GitHub Copilot, Lovable, Figma Make, Builder.io, and so on, we can now generate working, coded designs within minutes from plain text prompts. And with the introduction of MCP servers, our tools are no longer just interoperable, they're finally able to start understanding each other, acting as a translation layer between AI agents and our design systems, enabling code, design, and content to speak the same language. And it's incredible and slightly terrifying, if I'm honest. This is all really new to me. So we all know that AI can get you to something fast, but that something still needs a human to finish the job. AI is amazing at pattern matching, prediction, efficiency, but it doesn't understand empathy, accessibility, or nuance, not yet at least. It can give you the first 80%, but it's the human 20%, that last mile, that actually brings the meaning. So as design systems help us standardize the 80%, and AI is starting to help us automate a lot of what we do, that means our roles as designers are shifting again, from making things to making sense of things. So a few years ago, the film Ex Machina explored exactly that question. And it's a fantastic film, by the way. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to watch it. It's really, really interesting. So it explores what happens when the line between machine and human becomes blurred. When I first saw it, it felt like science fiction, like pure science fiction. And now, only 10 years later, although 10 years does seem still quite scary, it feels like it's just around the corner, like we're on the verge of something. We're already talking to chatbots that can write, draw, create music, and design better than me, better than most of us probably. And we're even debating whether AI can have taste. And that's an important question. Can AI truly understand the people it's creating for? Leah Tharin summed this up perfectly in her recent article, Why AI Cannot Simulate Your Customer's Behavior, which she wrote in response to a research paper claiming AI could soon replace traditional customer research. And I'm sure that's something that a lot of our companies that we work for have been considering. She disagreed, pointing out that while large language models are phenomenal pattern matching machines, they don't reason. They can be trained on large amounts of research data, sure, but people don't behave like data sets. The key call out was that humans will often say one thing, but then do something completely different. And it's that gap between what we say and what we feel where real understanding lives. AI can mimic empathy, but it can't mean it. It can generate fantastic looking things for us, but not the intent behind it. That gap between imitation and intention is where we as designers still matter, where we can bring value. What humans bring to the table is our ability to empathize, learn, adapt, and improve through experience. Which brings me on to something else that really stuck with me recently and kind of was the genesis of this whole talk, really. So I was listening to a podcast featuring Simon Sinek. You probably heard of him. He popularized the phrase, start with why. In the podcast, he said, we think AI will remove all the struggle. And the problem is, it will. But what you'll end up with is an entire generation of people who are entry level for their whole lives, because they will have learned nothing, even though all their products are fantastic. And that hit me hard, and I could not get it out of my head, because it made me realize that it's in the struggle where we do our learning. If everything becomes easy, we don't grow. I don't want to look back in 5 or 10 years' time and find myself in a place of stagnation, and I'm sure you don't want to either. So I mentioned at the start that I love video games. In particular, I love really tough video games. And it's the kind that most people would give up on after 5 minutes and say, why would I want to waste my time with this? But the truth is, I actually thrive on the challenge. That process of messing up, trying again, and slowly progressing towards mastery. For me, it's not really about the outcome. It's about learning, improving, and getting a little better each time. And I put it to you that design isn't just about outcomes either. It's also just as much about the process. We mentioned earlier, it's about how you collaborate, how you recover when a client or stakeholder doesn't get your work, when a design review goes completely off the rails. If you use AI to take away all the friction, all those why isn't this working moments, when you want to throw your mouse across the room, or in my case, the controller, you risk losing the craft that makes you who you are. Which made me think, if it's in the struggle where we learn, maybe that's where we find our real advantage. If AI can get us to good outcomes faster, the real question becomes, where's our value now as designers? I believe we find it in the process, that messy middle, that part we sometimes rush past because it's uncomfortable, the workshops that meander, the prototypes that fail, the feedback that stings a little because it's true. Take a quick moment to think about some of the defining moments in your career. I bet a lot of them were times of challenge, not when everything went smoothly. I know that's the case for me. Because we learn far more, I find, from the hard times than from the moments when someone simply says, you've done a great job. One of my first bosses, not John here, but one of my first bosses was notorious for getting us to start again if something wasn't good enough. And he would say it in that voice. It was frustrating. It was really frustrating, but it taught me an important lesson. Never accept mediocrity. Always ask yourself, could this be better? Does it fulfill all the user and all the business requirements? And of course, he was usually right, even though I didn't want to admit it at the time. That is the good stuff. That's where we sharpen what no AI can: judgment, empathy, and taste. So don't design the struggle out of your process, design with it. Let AI take the grunt work, of course, but keep the curiosity, the friction, and the reflection. Because the real value isn't what AI makes, it's what we become through the making. I'm reminded of H.G. Wells' famous quote, and sorry, this is another quote. I do like quotes. This is the last one, I promise. Adapt or perish, now as ever, is nature's inexorable imperative. This was one of Wells's final works, a short philosophical reflection written near the end of his life, where he explored the limits of human progress in the face of rapid change. I think it's just as relevant today, but maybe it's more like AI-dapt or perish. See what I did there? Name of the talk. We can't stop these changes, but we can shape how we respond. And that probably means reskilling, upskilling, cross-skilling, and even unlearning habits that no longer serve us. I know I'm having to do that constantly. And yes, that is uncomfortable. I find it deeply uncomfortable. But this kind of discomfort is what will help you grow. Just as we move from static HTML to responsive design, from pixels to tokens, we'll move again into AI-assisted, agentic, adaptive design. In fact, we already are. But that's not the end of design. It's just design evolving again. What keeps us relevant isn't how fast or efficiently we work, it's how deeply we care. AI can copy our syntax, but not our empathy. It can generate layout options, but it can't sit in a user interview and sense hesitation in someone's voice. It can't walk into a meeting, see that someone else's idea has just got ignored, and bring it back into the conversation. That's our advantage as designers. That's what will always make design, real design, human. Because when everything else changes, when tools, frameworks, trends, and our roles keep shifting, because they are and they will, empathy is the one constant that never becomes obsolete. So let's connect the dots. We've survived changes in our tool sets. We've adapted our changes to changes in our teams. We've weathered the storms of taste. Now we're facing huge changes in our process with AI creating alongside us. But here's the thing, designers have always thrived in flux. We're experts at turning ambiguity into clarity. We take mess and we make meaning. That's what we do. We're problem solvers. The only time change defeats us is when we stop learning, when we cling to old ways because it's comfortable. That's why I always try to tell myself, if something feels hard, you're probably growing. If it feels impossible, you're likely onto something important. So don't fear change. Use it as a mirror. Try and ask yourself, what's this moment trying to teach me? So here's where I'll leave you. Change will keep coming, faster, stranger, messier than we'd probably like. But that's okay, because as designers, we've always been good at this. We've built entire careers around adapting, learning, and improving. Every time that river shifts course, we find a new way to swim across. So when you're feeling overwhelmed by all the AI headlines, or the next design system trend, or whatever the next big thing turns out to be, just remember this. Double down on being human. Bring empathy, curiosity, and meaning into your work. And above all else, be kind to yourself and to the people you work with. The only constant is change, and our constant is how we respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really good. Got some interesting thinking to do there. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about AI. I can already see in the Slido that there are some questions around that. And for those of you who tried it and felt like, oh, I don't think this Slido is working properly, you were right, it didn't, but it has now been fixed because we're very agile in this place and we fix things immediately. So if you do have questions, please reload that Slido and type your questions in there. I will also want to point out that you are allowed to ask questions live. The Slido is just there to support those who might feel a bit, challenged in a big room. Okay, so now it is time for our second speaker. Yeah, I can look over that, it's ready. So I would love to, oh God, I need to look where I am in the deck now. So I'd like to welcome our second speaker, Diane. Please join us. You got yours.
Does this work? Can you hear me? Fine. Cool. Hi. This is a bit different to a large large organization. A bit different to presenting at Converge. You can see faces, okay? You can see everybody looking at you. Right, so do you think the world feels a bit crazy right now? Okay, lots of nods. Excellent. Phew, that didn't fall flat. And that's because, I mean, it is crazy right now, right? It's absolutely nuts. So look at all these things that we're being faced with almost on a daily basis. And it's always in the news. We're always looking at this social conflict, not trusting our governments anymore. Maybe I shouldn't have said that one, but supply chain disruption, growing inequality, lots and lots and lots of stress and things going wrong right now. And of course, artificial intelligence, which Matt, you've just spoken about. So who here suffers from anxiety? You don't have to put your hands up. Can you hear me now? Better? Can you hear me at the back of the room? Cool. I suffer from anxiety, and it's not always crippling, but it can be. And when I'm going through, this sounds really loud. Is that right?
No, it's perfect.
Ah, okay. When I am the most anxious and sort of really going through a difficult time, I have these sensations in my body, right? I can't get enough air in, my heart rate goes up, I can't sleep, I get terrible insomnia. It's all pretty damn awful. And pretty much fight or flight takes over, right? But what I've learned over the years is to see the early signs of what's happening and when to be aware that something's not all well. And what starts to happen for me is all these really rubbish thoughts start to run really, really fast in my head, and it doesn't turn off. And I am constantly scanning for the next great big catastrophe around the corner. But what I notice about these thoughts, they are all in the future. None of these have actually happened yet. Now, what do I do? Because you can't live like this. You can't be anxious all the time. So besides going to see a GP, of course, I love my job. I want to keep doing it. So what do? And this is why, this is not really, can I get a thing? Microphone? Yeah, thank you.
Very agile.
Yeah, it's very agile. Very agile. Great. Thank you. So this is why this talk is titled What to Do When the Future Turns You and Your Design System Team Upside Down. Obviously, I lead a team at Tesco. Oh, God, I didn't introduce myself. My name's Diane, by the way. I work at Tesco. I'm the design manager for the design system team. We work across commercial, customer-facing, in-store, everything, basically, at Tesco. We're a horizontal team. We have a design team of about 180 people, way more engineers. So we're quite small at the moment. It's just 3 of us, 3 designers. We are hiring, by the way. Anyway, so as I was saying, if I'm going to be leading a team, kind of need to get over this anxiety thing. You guys or the team needs to be set up for success. So how you do that when you suffer from anxiety? So the first thing is sort out my own mental health. And I got myself a therapist. And she is fantastic, by the way. So she's given me this framework, and there are 3 steps to this whole thing. So I'll take you through the top 3 things that I'm worrying about at the moment, and we'll do this. But her first thing is you write it down. So whatever the thoughts are that are going on in your head, you write them down. What this does is it takes it out of your head and makes it feel a whole lot less terrifying by making you actually look at it and stop it from running around in circles in your head. And it starts to break the cycle of fear. And then once it's down on a piece of paper, by the way, it's good to handwrite these things, you apply the statement, is this true, is it false, or don't know. And what's really important here is the don't know, because what this does is it eliminates the need to be right. And if you're anxious, you will feel a little bit of fear about having to be right. So the don't know opens up your thinking, and it moves you from worrying into a little bit more of action. More of your logical brain starts to take over. Once you've done that, you can ask, what is the one thing that we can do to move this forward? And this is really important because this moves you from worrying into action. So we'll try this on the next couple of slides. So the first thing is, oh no, I'm still on that slide, I'm looking at that, fine. So these are our top 3 things. Will I take my job? I'm not going to introduce them all here, but we'll go through these 3. And let's look at this statement over here. I think a lot of people are starting to worry about this, and justifiably so. It's quite a terrifying statement, but I don't know. I don't know if it's going to take our jobs. You know, I spent a bit of time thinking about this, and this is a very high-level summary of what I think about AI. I'm in no way qualified to talk about AI, but I do believe that information is always going to be around, and I do believe that we're always going to have to share information about our products. So our apples taste wonderful. This is how you get it delivered. This is what you do if they don't meet your expectations, etc. And we're always going to need that information, whether it's AI or machines reading it. And at the same time, we're going to need to package up that information in a way that people or machines will be able to understand. So over the years, writing has obviously evolved, but it's not going away. It's always going to be needed. And then the last thing is that personalization and AI are going to surface information in far broader ways and spaces and means than we've ever thought possible. And the people that are already for designing for design systems are already set up to design for that type of flexibility while thinking systematically, while holding on to brand high standards, etc. So after a little bit of thought, I decided that design system designers are actually primed for the future and will do really well. Of course, we'll have to step up. So before I go into what we're doing at Tesco, I just wanted to talk about back in the 1990s, 2000s, yeah, showing my age as well. There was this real sense of play and adventure when you came to work. And I don't know if anyone remembers this, but we were all mucking around with nesting tables and invisible pixels to get things, yeah, great, you know, get things to line up. But yeah, the main thing was that you go to work and it was an adventure and it was fun. And I feel like we're on that threshold again now. In my better moments, not when I'm anxious, by the way. So when we talk about this statement, AI will take our jobs, we're looking at what can we automate at Tesco. Now, obviously, I've put in the word bot over here, but it could be anything. One of the things that is probably our biggest time waster, takes up about a third of our weeks, is supporting and managing the support channel. So we are working on a thing to be able to triage our requests that are coming through the support channel, point it to our documentation if it can be answered by that, or send them off to a DDS drop-in session run by one of my colleagues over here. That'll save us about a third of our time. And it takes us about 27 days to resolve a request in the support channel with all the conversations and things that are going on. And at the same time, it'll help us feel a bit better about our jobs. Nobody really wants to feel like they work in a call center. The other things we're doing is looking at our documentation to see how we can get that to be AI ready. We're looking at a storybook parser, a few other bits and pieces. The other thing we were looking at was how can we be present inside the design systems, the designer's workflow? How can we support them in the moment? So we were looking at building a plugin that it ensures designers use the right component, make sure they're using tokens, not hex values, etc. But 3 weeks ago, Figma kind of announced something that beat us to it. Anyway. So my heart rate starts to slow down when I start thinking about these things a little bit more logically. So let's look at the next one. This is probably something that maybe every design system team might worry about. I don't know, but it's something I would certainly worry about. And it is a rather terrifying statement. I don't know. I think this is a reality that we probably all need to face into. We probably want to look at the things that we promised, which was speed, scale, and consistency across the organization. Are we actually delivering on those promises? So I looked at what we were doing in Tesco, and we're kind of measuring against these things. Last year at the Converge conference, I spoke about Tesco saving 31,000 engineering days, which was something mad. It's like 194 engineers working across the year. This year, we're showing a 33% increase at the same time of 50,358 days. I just want to pause there because I'm really proud of myself that I can say numbers better than President Zuma can. So the amount of pounds that we're saving the organization is quite crazy when we start to look at those numbers. In terms of the scale, we have, and this was a stat that we took at the beginning of the year, there are 150 teams using our design system across the organization. And our button components for consistency, I mean, I'm kind of reading in between the lines here, but the Figma analytics show that the button was used 437,338 times in the last 6 months. Now, in the last year. Now, I'm assuming that means everybody's at least using the same button. So we're probably getting somewhere there in terms of consistency. So I think it's unlikely that us at Tesco, we're going to lose our funding. However, I think there's stuff that we can do and we should continue to do. And that is to get really visible. We're looking at a content or a communication strategy. How do we get really visible? How do we get in front of our teams, share the work that we do, the struggles that we have, how we solve these things? And we want to take every opportunity to start doing this so that the teams can empathize with what we do and understand why it takes so long to get something out in the design system because of the rigor, etc., that we put behind it, accessibility, that type of thing. So in addition to that, we want to be sharing our value and our numbers, and we're looking at ways we can share this, like through TV screens throughout the office, etc. And lastly, the important thing with all of this stuff is to make sure that the right people see you. So the people who own the money, basically, you want to bring them along with you. We're also looking at what we can measure. There's a lot of really interesting data when you start to look at it. Our chats, our support channels, our drop-in sessions, who the most active people are, who ask questions, all that type of thing. So we're looking at this, and by the way, this graph is full of dummy copy, right? Like we didn't actually launch a chatbot that tanked our numbers in October. But basically what we're looking at doing at the moment is taking all this data, measuring it across adoption, and then over time mapping the events and things that we release and do across this timeline to see how the lines move and be able to talk a little bit about what we're bringing to Tesco. Right, so on to the final bit. Nobody wants to use our design system. And I think this one, it's true, but it's not nearly as dramatic as that. It's partly true, right? You're always going to have people who don't want to use your design system. There's always going to be detractors, and that is just the way it is. As much as we like to change their minds. But we've done a lot at Tesco to help adoption. We've pretty much done it all. We've spoken about the numbers. The numbers are quite large, but the numbers don't really talk about people, and they don't tell you that our users still struggle with these three things. So we have probably Figma libraries reaching in the hundreds inside our Figma organization. Do you know how many of those have buttons in them? And when someone does a search in Figma for a button, how do they know that the design system is, that's the one from the design system? So we don't actually differentiate our button names from other people's button names, which means it can be quite confusing for people to find things. Another thing, onboarding, well, we've been doing our day jobs and it's pretty hard to keep on top of all the onboarding, all the new joiners, all the material that they need to know. We've got videos, we've got a documentation website, we've got everything else, but we really need to get better at onboarding. So that's something that we're working on now, looking at material for them. And we've just started, again, the drop-in sessions that help people with a lot of this stuff. And then contributions. So contributions is an interesting one because we recently released a tiered level to our design system. So we drew a fence around the global components. These are things that we own, and the platform components. So these are things that we own as a design system team. These are things that everybody across Tesco uses, or everybody across Tesco using the platform use. And everything else is basically a domain component or a pattern, and those live in these domain libraries that we help set up. The problem is nobody knows what to contribute where anymore, and it's created quite a lot of confusion. So this is something that we're also actively trying to help. What we did is we launched the domain libraries, but we didn't give people support on managing those domain libraries. So this is a big area of focus for us as well. So to conclude that, basically, we need our design system to be so well designed that it becomes ubiquitous and ingrained in ways of working. And we need our designers in the design system team to become so visible and so helpful that they become critical members of the design community. To do this, we've recently hired a design advocate for the design system. She is running something we're calling the Design System Academy, DDS Academy, and she is leading on all of the customer-facing or community engagement aspects of the design system. We also have 2 open roles, so we're going to be hiring another designer. And with one of these roles, we're considering switching it to a content designer. So we're just trying to figure out what to do there. But I think we're in quite a good place. We're a stable team, and this allows us to be able to be a little bit more creative about our roles. So parting thoughts. Keep creating the future you want to see, or we are going to keep creating the future we want to see. I did this exercise on ChatGPT, and I asked it to put Maslow's hierarchy of needs through this and turn it into something for design system teams. And I can honestly say I haven't properly interrogated this, but I do quite like the concept. But when I did a quick scan of it last night, I can very honestly say that we're in a really good place. We have got all of our foundations met. We've got funding. We've got buy-in from senior stakeholders. We've got the autonomy. We've got the freedom to go away and do the things that we need to do. We're very well recognised within Tesco as people who know what we're doing and experts at our jobs. And we collaborate really widely with a lot of the design teams, of which there are many. So we are entering the top tier. I think we're about to evolve and become super strategic and meet our full potential. So those two roles, it's a good time to join Tesco. Sorry, GSK. Thank you. So I think what's really important here, especially if you are dealing with anxiety, is specifically around work. People are the heart of the system. People make the system for other people. And that's really something we should never forget. And it's not just you alone. It's a team. There's a team around you all the time. And a team that's using your product. So yeah, heart rate back to normal. What I will end with is something that stuck with me for 30 years now, I think it is. Do you know that the physical sensations in your body when you are frightened and when you are excited are exactly the same? Great. I didn't know that, but I did. I knew it 30 years ago. Now, oh yeah, whatever. So the only difference is how your brain interprets it. That's it. So we can totally choose how we want to face into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really nice. We've had two talks that has been a little bit kind of less about the nitty-gritty details of design system and talking a lot about kind of emotions and how we personally experience this, and I think that's fantastic. It's a really important part of what we do as designers. Having said that, after the break, we're going to jump into everyone's favorite part of design system, tokens. Excellent. So just as a quick check again, do we have any engineers in the room here today? That's more than we normally have. I love that. That's great. Do we have any product people? That's also more than we normally have. This is great. And designers then, let me see. That's a lot of those designers. And then random people who just joined because why not? Love that. Everyone's are equally welcome, and that's what we love here. So the reason I ask about engineers and product people is because from Design System London perspective, what we discovered over the years is that, yes, design system is a great bridge between design and engineering, but there is actually a third entity that's kind of been missing, and that is product. And teams that kind of have a good connection with product and product owners tend to also have a really good way of running a design system. So we really welcome that kind of trinity of beautifulness. And on that, here's the QR code again for questions. Please keep them coming, or keep them to ask them in the room if you're brave enough. But now I'm going to stop so you can go and enjoy more food. And on John's instructions, not mine, get drinking and come back and enjoy the next talk. Thank you for now. So let's get back into it after that break. How are we all feeling? Good. Excellent. That's what we want. That's the energy we're after. How is the red wine? Just don't know why I'm asking. Why not? Anyone on the red wine? Good. Top notch. The white wine? Top notch. How about that beer? I'm just asking random questions while the rest of the people sit down, trying to entertain the crowds. Okay, perfect. And I think that's it. So I can hear them. The last is an intense conversation. I'm here for it. That's what we want. Okay, so it's time for our last and final speaker. As I said before, we are going to go a little bit more into the weeds of things. We're going to talk about tokens. or I say we, I'm not going to, the lovely James is. So James, please come up on stage.
Away from the laptop. All right. You all hear me okay? Great. Cool. We're almost at the end of the evening. Yeah, I'm James, and I'm going to talk about something that I call design token interfaces. Let me introduce myself first. So, hi, I'm James. I currently work at Investec. Our logo is a zebra, so hence the crappy doodle, where I co-lead our design system, the imaginatively titled Investec Design System, or IDS. In my spare time, I have also been involved in the Design Tokens community group. I'm one of the authors for the design token format spec. So if you're really into your design token nerdery, then you might have heard of that. And if you want to see me shouting into the void online, you can find my website there or scan the code. And that's got links to my Blue Sky and Mastodon and stuff where I occasionally shitpost. Design tokens. They're in their most basic form, they're just named design values, right? As sizes, fonts, etc. And a lot of the time, people have what a lot of us call primitive tokens or foundational tokens, where we're really just describing the value, right? These are things like your color ramps, your red 100, 200, 300, size ramps, etc. And then there are tokens that have references rather than actual values. So they point to another token. Some people call this aliases. And if the thing being pointed to changes its value, that gets reflected by the thing that's pointing to it. And we often use these to build more semantic tokens. So these are ones that have names that describe their design intent, like their purpose in the UI. For example, an interactive background color or a link color or something like that. And I'm using colors here as an example, but this could just as well be sizes, fonts, you name it. And then, of course, downstream from that, in our components or our UI more generally, we reference those things to style up our UI. Now, some design systems then have this third component here. So I think Matt was showing that screenshot from Spectrum earlier with the big graph with like thousands of tokens. So some people do that. Not everyone does. We don't at Investec. We just kind of reference the semantic ones directly. But for completeness, that does exist. And this kind of tiered approach with this 3-tier architecture, so if I just flesh that out a little bit more to make it more realistic, has emerged as a sort of a common architecture, as a useful pattern that a lot of design systems have. And I think part of the reason it's popular is because it makes things like theming or modes like light and dark color schemes or different spacing densities relatively easy, because you can achieve them by just changing what your semantic tokens are pointing to, right? Because the design intent is the same. It's still a background or a text color or a font size or something. And you'll notice, as I sort of flip between these, the references from components to the semantic don't change. So we can sort of shift that responsibility of how the values get assigned based on the user preferences or the context or whatever, sort of further upstream. And a lot of, like I say, a lot of design systems are kind of organized this way, but this, I think, if you look at it this way, there's a sort of, that semantic tier creates like a dividing line. And if you imagine sort of cutting along that line and splitting those things apart, I'd argue you end up with sort of two parts of the system. You've got what I tend to call the theme on the left. That's the thing that provides values to those semantic tokens. And on the right, you've got your UI, your components, or just your, the UI between your components that is referencing those things to style itself up. And this kind of relationship is sort of implicit in a lot of design systems. But I started to wonder, what if we made it explicit? What if we called out that dividing line as an entity in its own right? And this is what I mean by a design token interface. So what does it consist of? Well, it's a description of what the tokens are, so their names, you've got their types, are they colors, are they font sizes, are they dimension values? They might have other metadata, they might have descriptions for documentation or information about the status, are they deprecated and things like that. The only thing they don't have that a token normally has is a value. So they're kind of these valueless tokens. And to the handful of developers who put their hands up earlier, this might look familiar because this is very similar to APIs in programming, right? Application programming interfaces, which are sort of dividing line between something that provides some kind of functionality and other things, other bits of software that consume that functionality and use it. And the API is often described as a kind of contract. It defines what are the functions, what are the data types that the thing needs to provide. And then things that use the API don't know or care what sits on the other side that's providing that. And likewise, the thing that provides it doesn't necessarily have any awareness of the things that are using it. So just as in programming, I think if we apply that thinking to design tokens, that might have some useful applications. So the first is we can divide and conquer. We can kind of create a nice division of responsibilities, right? So from the perspective of our UI code, it doesn't really matter what's going on in the theme, right? Whether that's got no modes or 100 modes, or whether it's an entirely different theme altogether, as long as it's filling in the same blanks with the same types, you're still getting colors, you're still getting font sizes or whatever you need. So other than your appearance changing, you don't have to touch anything in your designs or your component code. And so, whether we have light or dark modes or just an entirely different theme that's applying a complete, visual revamp, nothing changes on the right-hand side. Likewise, if we're busy building or maintaining our themes, we don't know or care what UI is using those themes. So maybe, we're doing what I showed earlier. We've just kind of got some sort of notion of tiers and we're changing the references based on modes or something like that. Or maybe we've got a totally different architecture. We've got something more complex going on behind the scenes. Like if you think of Figma, you might have multiple collections that are referencing each other and it becomes this kind of rat's nest of relationships. Or it might be something really simple, right? Why not just, if you don't need all that complexity, literally just fill in values for those semantic tokens. It doesn't matter as far as the components are concerned. Or you could go nuts and you could have, I don't know, some runtime thing that is taking, like Material UI, looking at the dominant color of your wallpaper photo and, I don't know, the position of Venus and the time of day and auto-generating color palettes and sizes and whatever else. And I think the beauty of this division is these things can evolve independently, right? So you could be taking a simple theme and making it more complex or adding fancy stuff like this, all the while not having to touch your components. Or you could be working on components, adding more components, or as consumers, you could be directly using the design tokens to build designs and screens, and they're independent of changes or updates to the theme. And it could be even different teams or different people working on these things, right? You can imagine in big organizations with multiple brands or whatever, different teams might own and maintain their own individual themes. As long as they all fulfill that same interface, it works. I think it opens the door to doing things like testing the themes themselves. So we probably are familiar with testing UI components, right? We might test accessibility, performance, or this and that. But how many of us actually test the themes themselves? So in our Investec design system, we've kind of started doing this. So we've applied this concept of a design token interface. We call it our theme interface. And we built a tool. So in our setup, we've got a Figma library with variables and different collections as our kind of starting point. We export that as a design token file, and then from there we translate it into code. And in Figma, it's really easy to rename a variable or delete one or add one, but that can have disastrous consequences in the code. So we wrote this little tool which knows our interface. Whenever we do a new export from Figma, it compares against that interface, and it will tell us if something's been renamed or something's gone missing or a new thing is snuck in that shouldn't be there. So we catch those problems early and we can deal with them before they cause too much damage. Another thing we've started exploring but haven't fully fleshed out yet is doing color contrast checking at that level. So we've got, like I'm sure a lot of you do, design tokens that are intended for background colors and other ones that are intended for foreground and like text or borders or whatever. And we can define rules, right? You can say, well, any one of these must be pairable with any one of those, and it must have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5 to 1 or 3 to 1 or whatever you need. And we can test that, right? We can write a tool which can work out all the possible permutations of combinations of one and the other, iterate over every theme or mode in the theme or combination of modes, and just work out those ratios and then tell us if something is not hitting or not meeting that criteria. And because you're just operating on the data, those tests run really, really fast. So you can check that stuff a lot quicker than you can when you're sort of doing it downstream in the UI, right? Like, yeah, you can run Axe or something on your UI, but it's got to do a lot more work to test the same stuff. Obviously, it assumes that your tokens are being used appropriately in the components, but as long as you're doing that, we can potentially save ourselves some grief by doing this kind of testing. So I sometimes call this design it like you mean it. If you've got that kind of tiered approach and you've got your semantic tokens, especially if you're kind of calling it out as a distinct interface, I would argue those are the only tokens you should be using in your UI, right? The minute someone is kind of reaching behind the curtain and directly wiring up a red 500 somewhere in the UI, they break things, right? That's no longer going to change when you go from light mode to dark mode or high to low contrast or a different brand or whatever it is. So whereas if you limit yourself to just the semantic tokens, then, as with that division of responsibilities, anything the theme can provide or future iterations of the theme will continue to work seamlessly. So ideally, I think, this is my spicy hot take. Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned at the start. I'm here as myself, right, as a fellow design token, and I'm not representing Investec or the design tokens community group. So any spicy hot takes are entirely my own, not theirs. Right, but that out of the way. I think you should do that, right? I think you should take those primitives and things off the table, like take away the temptation from the designers and the developers. And that's kind of what I mean by designing it like you mean it, because you're choosing things based on those semantic intents, not how they look. So instead of thinking, oh, that spacing is a bit tight, I want to go from, 32 pixels to 64. It's like, no, you find another token that is descriptive of that purpose of what you're trying to achieve and trust the system to provide an appropriate value. It's not your job to pick colors anymore. The system does that. So essentially, if you imagine some setup, you've got some theme doing whatever it's doing, that stuff is off limits. Do not touch. And again, so in IDS and our design system, we do exactly that. In Figma, we can hide the variables from publishing. It's a bit tedious having to go through and right-click and but you can do it. That way, for the designers, those things are taken off the table. But how do we do that for developers? So again, we made a little tool. So as I mentioned, we export from Figma to design tokens, obviously the DTCG format, because that's close to my heart. And then we've got a tool that goes through our interface, so it knows which tokens are supposed to be there, resolves the values for all of those. So it will follow all of those references and work out, what's at the end of that chain, and produce a new DTCG file, which has just got that. So we're going from something like this to that. And that's the one we then feed into the tools that generate code, so things like Style Dictionary or Terrazzo. And that way the output is guaranteed to not leak any of your private tokens out into the wild. So here is kind of a little screenshot. So this is before, this is what comes out of Figma. It's got references. As you can see, we've got different modes there. And then the output on the right is after that transformation's taken place and it's figured out the values. It's also figured out that in this instance, there's more than one mode that influences this thing, which is why it's ended up with 4 values. What you can't see is then that all the things that would have been referenced have been stripped out, so they've gone. And I think that also has implications for how you document your tokens, right? If you take that approach. So, you know, I'm sure we've all seen style guides and documentation sites that document the primitive ramps, right? Here is the hex code for our blue 500. Here is the pixel value for space XXL or whatever. I'm saying, don't do that. Take it away. Like, why does anyone even need to know that stuff? As an alternative, I really love what Atlassian have done in their design system. So they've got this wizard where it prompts you with a few questions and you kind of answer them. And after a few steps, basically you end up with like, here are some tokens that you should be using for your situation. So we haven't done that yet in our documentation, but I totally want to rip off that idea. Thanks, Atlassian. Then there's something I call infiltration because I wanted to give it a catchy name. So if our design systems had these interfaces and we made them explicit, what if we mapped one to another? So let's say that one in the middle there is, or the one on the right, I should say, is our design system's design token interface. And then the one on the left is that of another one. So I've kind of loosely based this on Bootstrap. We could create a mapping from one to the other. We could say, well, our background one, you know, in terms of its purpose is equivalent to body background or whatever on the other one. Once you've got that mapping, any of the other design systems theme will plug into your system. So you could, in this hypothetical example, map it to, say, Bootstrap, and then find any old Bootstrap theme online and plug it into your system, and it would color up and style up your UI. Now, that, of course, is a bit of a niche use case. Like, why would you do that? But I think there is a real-world application which is transitioning from one design system to another, or one substantial generation to another, which is something that we're kind of doing and Investec. In my previous job, we had a similar story where we had an old design system that we were trying to retire and move to a new one. Yeah, I'm seeing some nodding heads there. And it's hard to do big bang, right? Like that's a substantial amount of work for product teams to completely redo their UIs. So they're probably not going to want to do it. So you can make it easier for them by allowing incremental adoption. So they can sort of gradually swap out components from old to new. And so they can go from something that's entirely old, which is blue here, drop in some new stuff, which is the red, and then eventually end up where it's all, you know, all new stuff. But in that in-between state, you don't want the UI you actually ship to your users to look like a mess, right? You don't want to have different design languages kind of sitting side by side on the same screen. So you can smooth the differences potentially by, for that intermediate state, providing a mapping of your new design system interface to the old one. So then your new components kind of look a bit like the old ones and they don't stand out. So they can sneak in, camouflage, hence, you know, infiltrate, right? So I think for that kind of thing, that could be useful. And then there's sort of the, if you will, the inverse of that, we call it fusion. So I'm guessing some of you will have that scenario where someone wants to use some third-party widget or some specialist component with your design system. It might be something like charting, right? Like how many of us want to build our own version of high charts? We're just going to use high charts, right? Or if you've done data tables like AG Grid and things like that, that's where you're probably going to just lean on a third party, or maybe social media widgets could be another. Now, they'll typically have some customization options, and you could think of those as another type of design token interface, right? So then your job is to map your thing to their thing. And then those components will blend in with your design system because you've infused them with your design tokens and your look, right? And then obviously, again, you can be evolving your theme or swapping your theme, and all that stuff is just going to work. So they're sort of kind of the same but different, if you see what I mean. So hopefully I've sort of made the case and maybe whetted your appetite for like why there's value in taking this sort of implied interface and relationship that I think exists already in a lot of design systems, but actually drawing out as an explicit thing. And that's the thing you should document and sort of, you know, opens the door to doing interesting stuff like this. So having been involved in the design token standard formats, my head obviously goes to like, well, should we have a standard for this as well? And this is kind of my ulterior motive for giving this talk tonight. Like, I'd love to hear from all of you your views. Like, am I mad here, or am I onto something? Like, does this feel kind of useful? And if it does, you know, is that something we should sort of try and make easier for all of us to use? So I can share how we do it at Investec, and I think this isn't a complete solution, but I think this might be a starting point. So we basically just took the DTCG format, but we said, we bent the rules a little bit. We kind of said, you know, we have our tokens, they have types. It's not shown here. They may have some of the other properties that we support, like descriptions or deprecated status, but what they don't have is values. So we just use null, which works in JSON, as a kind of a way of denoting that this is a placeholder token, effectively. It works for us. The tools I showed earlier have been built around this. I don't think this is yet a universal solution. That's like, I don't know how this would work with things like the resolver spec, or whether or not they should be a separate thing that, or can be mixed with the standard format. So that's where, you know, we as a community maybe need to work on this. But I do want to turn this into some sort of proposal on GitHub and then kind of see where it goes. And I think if something like this did emerge, that would mean, you know, the tools become interoperable, right? Then like we wouldn't have to just build and maintain our own little scripts. We could just use some off-the-shelf tool to do the thing. Or maybe we could open source the things we've already made and all of you could use them, right? That'd be cool. I think a worthwhile mention here is, so hopefully I'm going to get his name right, Steve Gaudier-Larazo, who I think may have spoken at a previous event, right? Yeah. He proposed a few months ago this thing called the token listing format, which I think there's a potentially a lot of overlap between what I'm talking about and what he's proposed there. It's focused more on the documentation of the tokens, but in effect, it's describing tokens, but not assigning values to them. So in that sense, it's very similar. So I'll also be reaching out to him, but I think I haven't quite figured out in my own head whether these are separate things or related things or what. But again, that's where I would love to hear from all of you what you think and whether that's something you'd like to help out with. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble here. And there's a link again in case you missed it. Cheers.
Fantastic. So we're gonna do a very quick stage setting here, which you are pretending that you don't see while I entertain you. We're just waiting for the people who are going to help us with that. Yes. Okay, so I will introduce you to Steve. Steve did speak at an event. He was the one in Paris. I don't know if you remembered earlier when I told you we went international. But yes, he did. And I'll be happy to introduce you to him. Okay, so for those of you who haven't done your questions yet, get them into the Slido now. And yes, don't worry, you are very welcome here. I'll give you a hand. We got the team. Muscles are coming. Clearly, I'm not going to give you. The muscles will do all the work. Okay, perfect. So we're going to get the speakers back up. We're going to get some chairs out for them first. Don't look at them. This is not happening. This is like, don't look at the man behind the curtain. Just look over here. How are we feeling? Are we feeling ready to ask questions live in the room? No one is feeling that. Oh yeah, we got some hesitant. There we go, a very brave person right over there. And we have someone who's thinking about it. Don't worry, we got loads of questions in the, thank you, this is fantastic. We got questions in the Slido, so we got a lot going on. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. See, barely even noticed that it's now, if I can please welcome the speakers to join me while we do that. Okay, so first of all, oh God, we're really close. I love the so how you're feeling after that of those talks? Good? Yeah? They were excellent. I should start by saying thank you. Really, really nice. It's such a great variety, and I always love a personal touch as well. Okay, so let's see. Who is the first person to ask a question? Live from the audience. Yeah, let's start with you over here. Actually, I'm going to have to steal. There you go.
Sorry, who was that?
This lady over here at the front.
Hello. First of all, 3 brilliant talks. Thank you. So Matt, you called empathy our superpower. How do you keep that alive at somewhere as vast and as complex as GSK?
Oh gosh, I wasn't worried about doing the talk. I was worried about this bit. I don't know. You just, how do you keep empathy alive in a company as big as GSK? I think from a personal perspective, it's communication. It's just talking to people. It's something that I try to do in my role. I think my role as a designer is so much more than just creating visual stuff. It's about talking to people, engineers, the people who are just generally involved in the product team, or even just communicating across different teams. We've got loads of people here from different teams at GSK that I don't work with on a day-to-day basis, but we're all kind of in it together. So yeah, just communication.
I'd love to hear as well from you. I think your talk is sort of related a little bit to empathy in a way, and obviously Tesco is another quite large organisation. What's your take on this?
I mean, I think it's about curiosity, and I think also it's about getting out of your silo. We all tend to get into our little bubble. As I start to work more across the organisation with different teams, start to see their points of view, you just open up. Yeah, communication, curiosity, just staying in touch and not working alone.
Absolutely, let you in here as well, because it's not just designers who can have empathy. News.
Developers are people too, yes.
Yeah, developers are people too, and they can also have empathy. So how do you...
I'm not a purebred developer either, so I'm a bit of a hybrid. Yeah, I would agree, right? I think there's obviously a lot of design and tech complexity that goes into a design system, but as others have said before, it's a lot of it is just human relationships. It's more of a people thing. And just like if you were a product designer, you've got to try and empathize with your users and understand them and design for them. Well, kind of other product designers and developers are our users, right? So we need to engage with them, empathize, understand. So it's a huge part of what we do. And just as you both said for designers, I think the same is true for developers, right? We need to understand their pain points, where they're coming from, what they're working with. And as my mind's drawing a blank now, you mentioned product people, right? Yes. Equally relevant, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, what they said.
What they said, excellent. Of course you can.
Thank you. Also, the other thing is, without empathy, I don't think our design system would still be around today. We were heading down quite a dark path of, you will use the design system. And once we changed to, how can we help you? What problems have you got? How can we solve them for you? Things started looking a lot brighter.
I think that's really interesting. And as someone who's been working at different organizations around design system, I actually think that's a real change in mindset when people go from, this is something that we're doing and I need you to use it, which might be the case, but actually how is that communicated? As in, we are here to support and kind of, you know, it's an important part of the ecosystem of what's happening. Of course you can.
Just really, just to expand on that. No, so I was on a call today with a design. No, actually, it wasn't a designer from an agency. It was an account manager from an agency, and they wanted to know how to do something with our design system. And so, to your point, I tried my best to help them understand what was possible, and we looked for solutions together. And they listened to what I had to say, and then they went to their designer, and the designer actually ended up coming up with a better solution than I'd even suggested. So I think it works. It works.
Excellent. I don't know what that says about you, Matt, but, you know, it was inspiring the way that you said that. Inspiring? I think inspiring is good. We have a very eager person to talk, ask a question. I'd love to hear that.
All right, so I guess my background is more on the hardware side of things. And I guess the question, I'm kind of curious about like how digital side of things actually manage this design system, because how let me think of the easy way to say, so let's say car design, we always have a design director that says everything, you do everything. Whatever he says, you actually go and execute. So I don't know on the digital side, how is actually that being managed? Like, for example, the theme or the detail execution. I mean, because pages get separated in many different divisions, and everybody wants a piece of it. So I don't know how is that done?
So are you asking who makes the final decision, or who kind of is in charge of setting direction?
I guess, yeah, like a governance.
Yeah, governance. Okay, perfect. Do we have anyone who want to take this on a little bit? Yeah, go for it.
Make a start. It's interesting what you mentioned about the design director sort of calling shots with cars, I think you said, right? So what I've observed in a lot of design, or sort of, I should say, digital product teams over the years is this kind of one-way flow, right? The designer designs a thing, it gets reviewed, iterated, blah, 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 and eventually gets handed over to developers. And at that point, it's considered untouchable, right? The designer signed off. You must build it exactly so. And I actually think that's terrible because as a developer, I can empathize that there's always edge cases. You build the thing and you're like, oh, but what about this? What about that? Did you mean this? Did you mean that? And if you don't feel empowered to go back and challenge and have a conversation, you'll struggle and get frustrated, or you'll end up just kind of muddling through and making a thing which is maybe not true to the original intent that was in the designer's mind. So absolutely, you need the designer sort of experience and the developer experience. But like what we try and do in our team or our work is we consider it a dialogue. It's a two-way thing, right? When we start a component, yes, the designer's made a draft, but it's a draft, right? Like we review it collectively. We all try to poke holes in it. As developers, we're thinking about things we might need to worry about that they hadn't considered. And then we iterate together until we get something we all agree on, and that's what we then build. And sometimes that will mean that the designers have to go back and make some changes on their end as well. And I wish more teams did that. I think it's my spicy hot take, but I think that's a good way of doing it. I don't know if.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. But I got the sense that you were also kind of asking about hippos. Is it a hippo? Hippo? Yeah. People who come in and make it an executive decision. I think that doesn't really happen anymore. I mean, sometimes it does, I think, but based on research and best practice, you've got a lot of evidence to be able to have those conversations and have quite constructive conversations about them. So, of course, there's always going to be that element that you're going to have to deal with in your work, but it's quite systematic and proven and all these things, and it's got accessibility in there, and everyone says yes. So yeah. Did you have a follow-up? I saw you going.
I guess the thing about is that on the hardware side is like, yes, we have this feedback loop, where we call it, is that, okay, the engineers give feedback, okay, what you can do, what you cannot do, and usually it's like 6-7 rounds in the process. And but I guess it's like even for the designers itself, where like we have like say 500 designers like around the world, and then it's like it never really, and always there will be someone trying to break the rules amongst designers. So
I don't think that's a bad thing, right?
Yeah. In a way,
really
yes.
don't. I think that's where creativity starts to happen. It's just what do you let go and what do you embrace?
And usually, I guess that's where it's getting, because usually it would be the design director. I don't know. Well, every design director, different styles. Some are more liberal, more like group decision things. Some are like absolute monarchy kind of style. So it's kind of hard to say. But
if I may just add something, I think maybe one crucial difference that we've sort of been ignoring is, and I'm making assumptions here because I've not really worked in hardware, but although my wife is a civil engineer, so I kind of hear a little bit about building physical things. Digital stuff is very malleable, right? If we get it wrong or we change our mind, we deploy an update, it's done. If you've built a physical car and shipped it, you can't then go to the customer and go, oh, I just want to tweak this one thing, right? You've got to get it right first time or else, right? So I guess that must change the dynamic. But I don't speculate beyond that.
Yeah, I would say a very similar thing. So my partner, she works for GSK and she's in manufacturing, and they cannot go outside of those guidelines and those standards that they have, because they are making medicines for people. Whereas we as designers have that kind of privilege, as it is for, to have that flexibility within what we do. And it's the 80-20 rule that I was talking about earlier. You have those guidelines and those standards in place so that things remain as consistent as possible. But every day we get requests from various teams around the business, like, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we change this? Can we change that? And it falls on us as members of the design system team to decide whether that actually is applicable or not. And so, but we've got that ability to do that within design, which maybe you don't have so much in hardware, maybe.
Before we let this in, I just want to make a quick, for those who don't know, Hippo is the highest paid person's opinion, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And it does happen. I'm sure you've all been there. Someone comes in, so this looks lovely, but what about if you do this? And then they bugger off again. It's also called seagulling. I was about to say, it's also called seagulling. That's when you fly in, dump your opinion on stuff and fly off again. And it happens. And I love where you're working, Diane, where you say it doesn't happen anymore. I visit many different organizations, and I can definitely tell you that I might have seen some signs of it. So yeah, but it's definitely a thing.
John doesn't do that.
I think you work in a lovely place. That's what it is. So credit to your team and organization on that. Yes, absolutely. Please, next question.
So if we go back to empathizing, and if you want to have a brilliant working relationship, how many engineers are actually part of the user research and listen and empathize with the user? That is also a key, because the relationship needs to build from much earlier, and not like the so-called agile is part waterfall, part agile.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So before I get these guys in, how many engineers, can we get the engineers' hands back up again? How many of you engineers keep your, oh, she already took her down, she hasn't even, have you ever participated, if you haven't participated in a user testing experience interviewing that early stages, please take your hand down, see how many who's remaining, anybody has. This guy's taking a photo. I think he's trying to sneak in an opinion that doesn't. But yes, almost got me there. One person. So now with that in mind, well done you. Let's bring in the what do we do? How do we get that more to happen, or is it not? Is it happening for you guys? What's the take here?
So we don't really use a test design components, and the reason for that is you cannot just test a button on its own. However, our engineers are very, very close to our users. We've got a support channel where all of our team answer all of the problems or challenges that come from the design or engineering community. So when we are discussing challenges, solutions, modifications, etc., to components, the engineers have got very good insight firsthand to what the problems are and how frustrated those designers can be. So yeah, I mean, that's how we do it. That's how we bring our engineers closer. But in terms of the product teams, I would imagine that probably not that many of them attend user testing.
Yeah, that was I'm not sure that was a question, Jerry, was it? It was more of a kind of a statement. And no, it's a challenging one because I think, yeah, we don't. I think in general, our engineer, because of the way we work at GSK, our engineers are not generally involved in user research. And yeah, I think it's something we could get better at for sure. And maybe that's part of the whole kind of communication side of things. Like I think as designers, we're very close to product, but maybe, and this is maybe a GSK specific thing, we're maybe not so close to the engineering side of things. So yeah, I think there's a challenge there to actually think about how we communicate not only to product, to the stakeholders, but also to the engineers when we're talking about research that we're doing.
I can't also help thinking there's a little bit of a difference between design system and maybe more kind of traditional UX product design. Because what I've seen when we work with people and we're kind of trying to come up with ideas for the product, we are quite keen on having engineers part of the early conversations. And that could be like, why are we even here? What is it that we're trying to solve? And I think getting engineers part of that conversation is, and I am very happy to be corrected, I think it's slightly different than maybe the early stage of a design system, because those two things can come, design system can come from a different place. I've worked with organizations where it's actually engineering who are driving the design system, and they've been struggling getting designers on board. Yes, I said that, and that has happened. And there have been situations where maybe even, not as many that I've seen, but I have seen where product might have been the driver. So I think it's sort of UX, I don't really know how to separate them, but I'm going to call it product design versus design system. I think in product design, it is absolutely imperative to have engineers part of the early conversations. And there's a very simple way of doing that, and that's actually just invite them. And I think sometimes people just forget that the simplest thing is just to say, can you just join us? And then when they say no, or they ask why, you give them an explanation why you need that. And if that person then says no, you ask the next one. So, you know, it's a slightly different. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think it's a slightly different.
Design system, you're not going to test a component, right? You're not testing component, but when you complete a product, it is a process. So
absolutely,
you can't discount that.
Absolutely,
so from onset, from day one, engineering, and a beautiful idea is built on each other. We have to, like Matt said earlier, someone went away and have another conversation. It turns out better. So isn't that what it is, this relationship?
I mean, it's definitely, and I think as well, like I've seen enough of different organizations where they have different design, if we go back to design systems, but they have different design systems started without teams knowing that is happening. And that could be engineers that started one thing and designers that started another thing, and they've actually haven't even communicated. So there's still some work to be done there, but absolutely. Go for it.
God, don't forget. I just forgot what I was going to say. Right, that was it. So our engineers, we do a lot of stuff in design that is a little bit outside of the general delivery of components for engineers. And a lot of that is research with our users, talking to our users, retros, you name it. We're trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. And typically that type of work and the people kind of user side of work has been separated from the actual delivery of components that we're doing with our engineers. So what we are doing now is we're going to be sharing the work that we're doing beyond component delivery with our engineering and product team. I mean, saying that out loud seems a bit mad that we're not doing it already, but yeah, it is. I think that divide naturally, for some reason, is there, and you've got to work to break that down.
Did I see an arm over? Yeah, there we go. And we got another one over there. So let's do this and then the lady over here. Go for it.
Hi, it's me, Pavel. I'm a product designer. So I'm having a question. If you could rebuild the design system today, knowing everything now, so what would you do differently?
The big questions.
Not a thing. Our one is
Well done.
perfect. Kidding. I'll walk right to that. I mean, we're actually halfway through building our design system, so we're, although 2 years in. I think, I like to think we're kind of, our design system is trying to replace legacy stuff that's been around in our organization. So we're trying to learn from mistakes that were made in the past and do better. Like anything, it's not going to be perfect, and it's already maybe showing flaws, but it's not. Yeah, I'm struggling here. I don't.
So you're building it at the moment.
Yeah, kind of. We're building it up while it's being.
Right.
What we have is starting to be consumed. Yeah.
It's difficult to know what you'd be doing then.
It is. I think there are, maybe around the governance and things, there are things I would have, if I could go back and start again, I would do differently. I think we didn't quite find the right way to involve more people like designers and some of the other sort of like product people earlier, and that's caused a bit of friction. I like to think we're doing better now. I'm looking at my colleague over there. But you know, with the benefit of hindsight, I think there's stuff we could have done better earlier on. So maybe that type of thing. So again, it's more about the, I suppose, the people, the governance, the process. That's the harder stuff than the mechanics of actually cranking out, you know, buttons or tokens or whatever.
I would say the same. Like, I've seen that as well. And I think documentation and governance and just kind of inviting the right people from the beginning.
You know, I'd also say that all of the mistakes we made were really valuable. We learned so much from all of those. So I probably wouldn't want to change some of those because we really were just doing the best that we could at the time with what we knew. Remember that the Tesco design system is about 10 years old. What I would change is involving product owners a lot earlier. Product owners tend to be forgotten in design systems a little bit. Would definitely involve them a lot earlier and sooner. Well, earlier, sooner, more, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it at the beginning as well about, I really think it's the kind of the trinity of the product, engineering and design. I love you two struggling over the microphone over here. That's all right. It's okay. You are the allocated microphone holder. And I do think that product is something that we do need, and I would probably encourage every single organization that I have ever worked with and anyone that I will work with, get product people included early. And I'm going to say that for those product people here to just kind of really rub their shoulders a little bit extra, they have so much power. They hold so much power, and you don't realize that until you need them to implement something, because they got a plan, they got a roadmap, they got deadlines. And when you come and say, all right, can we look at that? We look at that and goes like, where was that 3 months ago when I put this together? If it wasn't there, it's not happening. So you need to get them on board early. That will be my one thing to take away. And from my side, sorry, I'm going to answer one more thing I would say is metrics. What I realized many times is that there's stuff that I didn't even think about that we could measure until it's too late, because we don't have the numbers from the beginning, and we didn't know when we started that those numbers would be really good numbers to have. So kind of just like, that's hindsight, obviously. So just kind of knowing what those metrics that you don't think of immediately could be really useful.
Measure everything.
Measure everything. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other questions? We had the lady here first. Okay, you go first, then we have to take this lady here because she's been waiting. Go for it.
Hi, yeah, my question was about metrics as well.
What a segue.
For Diane, because you showed some metrics, so I was wondering, how do you track those metrics, and how do you show or demonstrate to the business the return of investment on the value or the value of the design system? Or yeah.
Yeah, so this is a tricky one because, look, we work in a very large organization, so we have a lot of numbers. We have big numbers. And we kind of have to trust the analytics that we're given. So we are trusting Figma to tell us that that is the right amount of assertions, etc. We did a very complex calculation that sort of took how long it takes for a designer to create a component, how much it takes a designer to create the same thing if they weren't creating components, and if it took a product designer, how long it took them if they decided to make a component that just catered to their needs. And we did this calculation and we did it across all the components, and we worked out that the amount of time that we're actually saving people is, we're talking about this today, it's almost 2 days a week of all the designers. Now, it sounds, I mean, bearing in mind there's 170 designers in just our department, and then we have 260 designers using across the organization. It kind of seems a little bit crazy, those numbers, but we're working on the fact that we've been given them. So we then take those, we talk about the salary saving that we're saving, or the amount of people they would have to hire in order to fulfill those hours, and we take that back to the business with a lot of caveats, basically. I did it again. I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry. Anyone else got anything to add on metrics? I know this is always a really hot topic. Everybody always want to understand. Business only care about return on investment. It's easy to tell someone is going to be consistent, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be better, but where? Show me the money. That's always the hard part.
I mean, I would definitely second get metrics as soon as you can. And again, maybe with benefit finds out. I mean, we should have done a bit sooner, but it's tricky, right, to kind of get those measurements. And I'd actually be really interested to know how you compared building your own component versus using one from the design system.
We just did interviews.
Right. Well, I was going to.
Yeah, we literally interviewed the designers and said, well, how long would it take you? In some cases, we did measure them doing it. We sat and watched them do it. Yeah.
Because what we've started doing right now for our one is we've sent out a survey to all the designers, developers, and product people. And one of the questions in there is how many hours per week do you think the design system is saving you? Because it's still ongoing, like we haven't got all the results yet, but my hope is we'll get whatever people think it is, and then we can, average those numbers, and we've, by other means, we can estimate how many designers or developers we have. And so, multiply one with the other, you end up with amount of hours or dollars or whatever saved. So we're going to try and do something like that. But again, there's caveats, right? It's a really hard thing to measure accurately, I think.
And I think what's quite interesting, because the numbers themselves seem crazy, is even if the numbers aren't 100% accurate, if you're measuring them over time, the more important thing is the percentage of increase year on year. So that's why I specifically called out that 33%, because that's what we're tracking. That's the important thing. It's showing more adoption. It's showing that things are growing. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
The only thing I would add to that is that if you don't have metrics on your design systems, don't worry, because it is really hard. And for example, our Omni design system it's a fairly new design system, and we don't have a great deal of visibility over how it's being consumed by people because of the way that we work as a business. So we know that metrics are important, but if you don't have metrics, don't worry. As long as you know that you need to and look for ways to do it, I think that's also, you're on the right path. We're on that path as well. So.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a lady. Have you asked a question? Let's go for it.
Hi.
Hello.
So this is of the conversation of AI. I found that AI can be quite democratic in that it can make non-specialists all of a sudden quite knowledgeable about something. So I'm not sure how I'd sort of managed it so well, so perhaps that's why I'm asking you. How do you manage someone who is completely inexperienced in something, say design, all of a sudden kind of saying, oh, but design standards say we should do this, or perhaps from an engineering perspective, oh, can't you just use Python or something? You know, like how do you work with people when they use AI without the proper knowledge behind them and they're convinced that it's a good solution? So how do you work with these people?
This is a great question. I'm hearing a little bit, Matt, of what you were talking about, that quote where he says, like, everyone will be at a kind of junior level forever and ever. Exactly. Yeah. So therefore, I feel like I'm going to point at you to start with.
Oh, gosh.
You're welcome. Great question.
I can honestly say I don't feel like I've been in that situation yet with people, but I can flip it on its head and say, I think I've been in that situation where using AI has made me feel more knowledgeable about things than I actually have experience of. And I've had to kind of stop myself and think, should I actually be communicating this? Because I can't really back it up. You know, I'm kind of relying on what AI is telling me, but do I really understand what it's telling me? Yeah, so I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I'm putting those checks and balances into what I do to make sure that I'm not communicating things that I don't fully understand with other people. I don't know if either of you have anything to... That's a great question.
Yeah, it is a good question, but I also wonder if it's not necessarily AI being the problem here. I would probably say that this person is, or people like this, are just someone that you have to deal with as like a tricky stakeholder or any other person that is opinionated about something that you need to educate them on. And what I would do in those situations is fall back on best practice, the evidence, the reasons why you can't just change it to a hyphen, the impact that's going to have. I think when you start talking about the impact that those decisions are going to have on the greater whole, you can start having conversations with that person around that.
So we're running towards the end, but we're going to get one more question in. I've got loads of questions that we didn't get answered, but that's because I didn't expect the brevity. This gentleman, you've been very patient with us, so let's go with you. I saw you over there back. We give you one as well, and then that.
Thank you so much.
Go for it, please.
Thank you so much. So my name is Max, and my question is mostly for James, even though I would love to hear more answers. So I was really excited to hear that you try to work on some sort of standard for the semantic tokens, for the design tokens, because it's been, I think, a very ongoing problem that we know we can use this, but there was nothing to back this up. And I'm really excited to hear that something might emerge. However, I know two things, two big problems, which belong to this space, and I'm keen to know how you try to address them. One is, what are the things we actually need to tokenize? So most people, when they do presentations, they talk about colors, obviously, because colors are the easiest. But there are shadows, radiuses, the spacing. Is the same spacing like for grids and for typography and for forms? Is it the same spacing with different spacing? Do I have to tokenize shadows, animations? So question number one is, what do we actually have to tokenize? And another one is the more complex relationships between different tokens. You've mentioned contrast between A and B, and that's amazing already. But most of the components in light-dark theme world need to be surface-aware, context-aware. The same button may transition from surface to surface and needs to change its color seamlessly without the component actually undergoing a single diff. And there can be more complex interactions, like how flexible your standard can potentially be in expressing those. And I'm sorry if it's long. It has to be a long question.
Before you get started, this is a brilliant conversation for the pub and the network later. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to give a very quick high-level answer, and then we're going to deep dive into that.
think that's a good idea because, yeah, I could totally nerd out about this for hours.
Otherwise, I can see the two of you going on. And I love that.
I think maybe if I just focus on your first one for now, and perhaps we could catch up about the other bit later. But I don't know if you're familiar with the DTCG format, but it has this concept of types. So it's similar to like strongly typed programming languages. And I remember in the early days, there was a lot of debate about what the type should be. So we landed on, to give an example, we have something called dimension, which is an amount of distance effectively, right? So currently it supports pixels or rems as the unit, but there's a provision that, that could be extended in the future. And of course, those things could be used all over the place in UUI, right? They might be used for font sizes, line heights, padding values, gaps, widths and heights of elements, etc., right? And there was a lot of debate about, well, should we have one type that does them all, or do we need different types for, space versus font size versus whatever? We landed on just one for all because I suppose the problem we're trying to solve really is interoperability between tools. And if you're trying to take a platform agnostic value and then translate it into something for, let's say, iOS or CSS or for the web or whatever, that's going to be the same regardless, right? You're converting, for example, pixels to DPs for Android or something. It doesn't matter where in the UI those things are being applied. But there was, I think, if memory serves, a proposal which is still kind of dangling and could maybe work its way into a future iteration of having some extra parameter where you can indicate the intended purpose. And actually Figma variables have something a bit like this, right? There's in the properties, you can say, this variable is for spacing or font sizes or whatever. So like a standardized version of that, basically. So they're kind of similar but different concepts, I think. That's kind of where we landed. Maybe I'll just stop there because otherwise I'll go on for ages, but definitely happy to, chat more about this. I don't know if that helps.
This is a brilliant future conversation. Good question. I feel like you could do a talk about that by itself, so that's amazing. Unfortunately, that is what we have time for the Q&A. Don't move, I'm not done yet. Thank you so much for joining me. Big round of applause to our speakers. I'm going to ask you to exit stage left. While I turn this into a very quick look at this, the smoothness around here knows no boundaries. So we are about to wrap up. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I feel like I'm speaking for two microphones at the moment. Before we wrap up, we need to say some thank yous. We want to say thank you to our speakers, so that's fantastic. I obviously want to say thank you to our amazing host, JSK, for hosting us in this place. It's been absolutely brilliant. Also, a quick shout out to all the people who's been helping serving us these amazing food and drinks. So thank you so much. Excellent. Obviously, I also want to say thank you to the people behind the scenes, literally behind the scenes over here. So it's obviously to our event team at YLD. We have some people who work really hard to make this happen. It's not just me, obviously. So also, because I can tell, sorry, I've got in the space of randomness, absolute random, I got some names here that I need to pull out. And I'll tell you what, because this is when we have our little Oprah moment. If anybody ever been to our events before, does everybody knows Oprah, you get this, you get that? Oh, some of you don't even remember this reference. Okay, that's fair enough. So anyway, we have had a rebrand and we made some new bags and some new merch. And I've got two people. So if these people are still in the room, you are the lucky winners of tonight's draw. Do we have Rob Linham Wilkes here? Absolutely, congratulations. And do we still have Samantha Caulfield? No, Samantha, you missed out. Sorry. You will see it on the recording and go, damn it. Do we have Lauren Fitzsimmons? Lauren? She is here. Fantastic. Congratulations to you too. Okay. So this is what happens when you come to a DSL event. You come home with some merch, if you're lucky, because we haven't got merch for everyone. So on that, you think, do you know what? This was fantastic. When is the next one? You need to wander no further. It's right here. Design System London number 15, which is sponsored by the fantastic people at Lloyd's. Do we have any other fantastic people from Lloyd's here by any chance? We do. Amazing. We are very much looking forward to seeing you in February, if I remember correctly. Don't worry, it is not on Valentine's Day, even though I made that very clear because, you know, we don't want to compete with your sweethearts. So it's not happening on that. Don't worry, it's all good. We are very good at planning. And as a last note, we are going to continue the conversation, especially there was some interesting tokens ones over here. We can stay around here for, is it 5-10 minutes? 10? 5 minutes, and then I'm going to very kindly ask you all to please leave. And please make your way to All Bar 1, which is down the stairs opposite outside, and we'll see you there to continue the conversations. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and thank you for joining us.